Hi, I'm Sarah Lacey. I'm still here with Tim O'Reilly and Reid Hoffman, and we're talking about the Web 3.0 data revolution. Now, we've talked about some of the scary things about this. We've talked about some of the really exciting future frontier things this could enable. What about the immediate commercializable opportunities? You know, we're very familiar with what came out of Web 1.0 and 2.0. Do you see Groupon as a Web 3.0 company? You've talked about their potential for data.
I think I think Groupon can be a Web 3.0 company because what happens is what a Web 3.0 company is, not to be too semantic about it, but it's using these massive axes of data that people are producing explicitly and implicitly, and then you generate analytic data in front of it. And obviously Groupon has a lot of, where are people, which locations, what offers do they want, which offers does this person want, what is the pattern, all those sorts of things. And I think when you see the iteration of their product, I think it will be a Web 3.0 company. I think it's in the future as opposed to immediately right now.
So it's kind of like Google, where it was kind of halfway in between?
At the moment.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I think I was just listening to a talk by Bill Janeway where he made mention of Montgomery Ward and Sears Roebuck being some business model innovations that came about because of the railroad. And it just kind of as a way of highlighting that as this data-rich sensor network world gets more fully deployed, the business model innovations are going to be a surprise to us. And I do think if I had predictions, they will have to do with stuff and the physical world and the moving of stuff. So I think that for example, Zipcar you could potentially see as a. I mean, again, I hate the term Web 2.0, even though
you have some responsibility with it.
But everybody got it wrong. It was not a version number. It was the second coming of the web after the bus. Maybe we have to have another bus to have Web 3.
According to a lot of press, we're in another bubble now. So.
Yeah, so maybe we will. But I do think that there's this interesting dimension of which we've been exploring. In the Web 2 Summit, we had one that we called Web Meets World, for example, where we were really focused on this idea. And I talked a little bit about Web Squared as one possible name. But this idea that we are instrumenting the physical world. And that I think that some of the business models that will surprise us are revolutions in how we move stuff, how we manage stuff, how we manufacture stuff. And they're not going to be purely digital.
So I agree with that, but I also think some of the revolutions will be digital.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, because the whole thing is the digital stuff is much easier to munch.
Yeah.
And so you can get to those revolutions.
And absolutely. We're already seeing, for example, the displacement of huge classes of physical goods.
Right.
I mean, people don't buy CDs anymore. They don't rent DVDs anymore. Books are following, not too far behind. And so yes, there'll be a sort of transformations of various kinds of physical goods into digital goods. But food isn't going to become digital.
Right.
But even more than that,
transportation isn't going to be digital.
Like, I don't know if you had a chance to play with LinkedIn Skills, although you should, because I think you'll find it interesting.
You always work at a LinkedIn plug.
No, I like LinkedIn Skills.
Look, that's why LinkedIn's a successful company, because you're always plugging it.
I think it's because there's 100 million people using it.
That too. But I think my theory is you've gone to plug LinkedIn to all of them.
To 100 million people? Yeah, sure. But part of the thing is we, by a mashup of what was in LinkedIn profiles and Wikipedia pages and an analysis of the skills graph within that, create an ontology. And then that ontology can help guide people in terms of like what skills they feel they should develop, what skills are on the rise or not, how to look at a particular skill. It could even lead to certification, other kinds of things.
So maybe you should unpack this for people who aren't familiar with LinkedIn Skills. I thought the use of Wikipedia as the taxonomy was a brilliant stroke because it's sort of taking something that's effectively crowdsourced.
Right.
If there is a Wikipedia article on this topic, that means it's a common term of art for a particular skill. And it was a way of breaking down, because people self-identify, hundreds of different ways for the skill that they have, and to make the Wikipedia entry the canonical name was brilliant.
Yes, exactly. And it was one of our data scientists actually came with the data. I was like, yes, that's great, because it's a combination of the 100 million people who've all put in, plus the crowd, kind of edited mechanism. and we can derive skill graph from both of them, and then we can line them up, and we know which skills are pretty important and what other skills are related to.
That brings it back to that theme that you mentioned about mashing up data. One of the skills of the data scientist is to take disparate data sets and figure out how, when you bring them together, you create something that's more valuable than was in either of the original data sets. And that's why data scientists are going to be one of those most valuable skills
Right.
coming forward. This is a job title that didn't even exist probably more than 2 or 3 years ago, and now you'll see companies with a chief data scientist.
And a massive growth. Like, for example, Hadoop as a skill within LinkedIn, climbing like that.
Yeah.
Let me get back to what you were saying about the physical world and manufacturing and a lot of these sort of old world economies changing. Is that innovation going to come out of Silicon Valley? Those aren't particularly things we're good at.
Well, I think there are a lot of trend data points, and it's unclear how they're all going to play out. But remember, when new technologies appear, they usually are fairly crappy. Those of us who were around at the beginning of the web remember how much worse the web was than CD-ROM-based multimedia. But it had the seeds of the future. And so when you look at things like the rapid prototyping devices that are out today, they're fairly crappy. You can't do things the same as you can in a factory in China. But they will get better. And we may have a world in which there is distributed local manufacturing for a lot of goods, and we are passing basically digital files around. Effectively, we'll have peer-to-peer file sharing. We'll have piracy of objects because they're going to get manufactured in the local machine shop. So I think there's going to be some interesting opportunities for mass customization of various kinds of objects.
The other thing I'd say in terms of the Silicon Valley part is one of the things that the lens of entrepreneurs and technologists, investors, et cetera, does in Silicon Valley very extremely well is creativity. And I never really like to bet against that creativity. So actually, if you go back pre-iPhone, your basic view of mobile in Silicon Valley.
US is horrible.
Yeah, it was retarded.
It all would come out of Europe.
Yes, exactly. And now look at iOS, Android, et cetera. So is it just because it's physical? Do I think innovation won't come out of here? Absolutely not. I think that, and also not all of it will come out of here, but the ability to be massively creative in this kind of intensifying, amplifying lens that we call Silicon Valley.
Right. Well, and to fail, and to break rules, and to rethink industries.
Yes.
I mean, there's certain cultural aspects.
Yes.
Again, thinking back to this talk of Bill Janeway's that I just watched today, he was talking about the need for Schumpeterian waste. It's like for people to fail, and we need to have. That's one of the characteristics of why we need bubbles, because that's where you get a lot of innovation, or is in periods where there is a great deal of waste before people get it right. He described 3 stages of innovation, and only in the second one, which is sort of the building out of a known industry, could you kind of actually be efficient. And in both the initial development of technology and in the development of new business models, waste is essential.
So as investors, are you guys funding companies that fit in this data Web 3.0 rubric now? You think you will be now? You think it's 5 years off?
Absolutely,
Absolutely now. Right, and also 5 years.
And absolutely 5 years ago.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I mean, look, because I think the thing is clearly what's happening is there's going to be this massive substructure of data, and I actually think that one of the things that made me realize how clever some of the things that Tim was saying when we first met was the data as a platform, right? Like you have this web as an open ecosystem, and data is now becoming a platform. And it's not just data out of one set. This is actually part of the reason I thought it was worth kind of going on the record and saying something perhaps a little foolish like Web 3.0 as a way of kind of trying to draw attention to this, which is it's not just like one data set in Facebook or one data set in LinkedIn or one data set in Twitter, but it's actually these sets indexed by people, indexed by locations, and across the multiple data sets on a kind of grassroots up basis that's going to create really amazing.
And I will bring this back around to the very beginning of my activism in speaking about data. I originally came to this out of open source software and thinking about the consequences of the commodification of software as we knew it. And something else was going to become valuable, and I started thinking that it was going to be data. And the question that I posed to my audiences back around 2003 was, do we want all of that data to be held by one provider, or do we want to have a world in which there's data from multiple providers that interoperates and works the way the internet does today? And I think the jury's still out on that. You know, we do have companies that are trying to get a lot of the most important sources of data, and we may yet see more consolidation, so that some small number of companies control a great many data assets, and that's a future I worry a little bit about, because like Reid, I find much more creativity happens when we have an open system.
Well, I mean, that's the concern a lot of people have about what's happening with mobile now, these controlled platforms. I mean, I don't know if you guys have read Tim Wu's book all about how as things get, more concentrated, you have these oligarchs who control everything, and there's monopolies in the name of making things easier for consumers, and then we're in the situation that radio had, the telegraph had, any major communication medium.
I will just try to put that in perspective by saying, yes, that is likely to happen, and I have enough faith in innovation that it will just break out somewhere else. We had the era of IBM, we had the era of Microsoft, and then we had the era of Google, and it's like the half-life of each of them is getting shorter.
Yeah, it's
because as soon as things get, if somebody gets too powerful, the innovators go somewhere else.
Right.
Well, I don't know if it's the innovators get too the industry gets too powerful as much as innovation, and people who want to innovate is a constant. And if they can't innovate here, they'll innovate over here.
Yeah, exactly.
And we should harness it the right way.
Well, and of course, and that's why a really smart company will figure out how to keep that virtuous circle of innovation going in their ecosystem.
And by the way, that's the reason I think the answer to your dichotomy is blended. It's not really either or. I think it's going to be blended, because I think some of those companies will be smart.
All right, well, I want to thank you both for coming. We will be watching your own personal data revolutions and the grander data revolution, and I'm sure we will one day blame you for making us all say Web 3.0 the way we blame you for making us all say Web 2.0.